get started. Please feel free. We want to be really informal. So if you want to get more pizza, things like that. So I'm Sue Atkins. I'm the Associate Director of Employer Relations in the Career Center, and I work with my colleague Robin Hahn, who many of you should know, our Associate Director of Engineering Career Services. And we're happy to sponsor this with the Women in Computer Science. Thank you, ladies, for collaborating with us. It's great. We've been hearing a lot of questions about tech hiring and recruitment, and we thought it would be great to bring some of our great professional colleagues here, both recruiter and an engineer, to kind of share their insight and wisdom, especially if you're looking for internships and for full-time roles. So we really appreciate the collaboration and having this event today. So our two panelists are Valerie Ziz. She's a university recruiter at Veeva Systems. And then we have our friend Caroline Vanderlee. She's a software engineer at Intersystems. So she'll be our two representatives, and Chris, of course, who's here as well from Intersystems, is helping out as well. Thank you all for coming here. And I will say disclaimer, right? They're two organizations, so they're not representing every tech industry right now, but they can kind of give their perspective from their organization. So thank you both for being here. And a Tufts alum, I should say. Caroline's a Tufts alum as well.
Graduated in 2021.
Fantastic. So why don't we just start there? Why don't you both just kind of introduce yourselves, your role, what do you do in your organization, and we'll go from there. I have some questions, and we'll have time for questions in a little bit later.
All right. Okay, this thing is on. Hi, everyone. So like you mentioned, I'm Caroline Vanderlee. I am a Tufts alum. I graduated in 2021. I am also a WICS alum. You guys do great work. I graduated from the School of Engineering with a computer science degree. And since graduation, I've been working at Intersystems. I started with their rotation program and eventually was placed in the quality development department, where I've been working as an engineer ever since.
Hi, everyone. I'm Valerie. I'm not from Tufts, but I'm from Trinity. So another NESCAC school, not too far off. Graduated back in May of 2022, and now I am a university recruiter at Veeva Systems. And I've been there for, again, full year and a half now. Basically, I work primarily in everything you would think of. I do interviews, I read resumes, I go to career fairs, host events, et cetera, et cetera.
So talk a little bit about the types of roles and the types of technical things that you guys recruit for in your positions that you're in, obviously from your perspective and from a recruiter.
Sure. So what me and my team currently do, we hire both interns and for full-time. And interns are, our software engineering interns, as you'd expect. And then for full-time roles, we're currently focusing on our new grad associate software engineer, associate performance engineer, and then associate DevOps engineer as well. I'm out of our Boston office where we hire for those, but we have a few other offices across the US and in Toronto. Our headquarters is actually in the Bay Area in Pleasanton, California. So that's where a lot of our hiring goes on, but definitely still plenty here in Boston if you're interested.
Yeah, so Intersystems is a software company that has its fingers in a lot of different pies. So we're not tied down to one particular process or style of development, which means that we have roles open in a lot of different areas, a lot of different departments. So we can hit a broad variety of skill sets. It's kind of a matter of what skill set do you have, and then which department is looking for someone with that skill set. In terms of specific roles, we do direct hiring and then internships. And also for new graduates, we have two rotation programs, the core development rotation program and the solutions development rotation programs. Those are really geared at people like yourselves, fresh graduates from college, and they'll rotate you through a couple of different teams until you find the one that fits you. And I am a graduate of one of those programs, so yeah.
What about co-ops? Because we do have a co-op program in our School of Engineering for our computer science folks. And so I wanted to hear if you guys know about the co-ops as well.
I am not really sure about the co-ops. Chris is shaking his head, so I guess that's that.
No.
Sadly, we do not.
Okay.
If someone needs a co-op during like the summer, if they're graduating in December,
adhere to that, but we only offer summer internships. And sometimes it's a case by case basis that we make, but not really.
Kind of similar answer. I think most of our internships are summer internships. I know we do some like Northeastern co-ops in the past with them. So I think it's possible if you really want to do like a non-summer, like winter to spring co-op, we could probably talk to my manager and see if we could make that happen. So I'm gonna put that as like a good maybe.
That's good. So as far as the the labor market right now, as we've all seen, has gone up and down, right? We've seen layoffs and things like that. What are kind of some of the things that you guys are seeing from your organization standpoint, in terms of giving students hope that things will change and all of that? So.
Yeah. So Intersystems is a private company. So we are actually not beholden to the whims of the stock market in the same way. My company has not done any layoffs. We are still hiring for open positions. Oh yeah, knock on wood. We are very deliberate with hiring in the sense that we never open a role unless it's needed. So we're being like very careful and making sure that when we open a role, it's something that we really need. So we're not over hiring, but we do still have open positions.
Yeah, kind of honestly piggybacking off that a little bit. Veeva is a bit of a larger company. It's a public company, but we're definitely not even close to like, let's say FANG size, for example. So I know we try to really practice good hiring practices. We also really haven't had any layoffs anytime recently that I can remember or that I've been working here. So again, also prioritizing a lot of careful hiring. Again, I know you're probably nervous because there's a lot of instability along, again, especially FANG is kind of leading the way with that. And I definitely do understand. We've been seeing a larger influx of candidates, in the past couple of years than in previous years. I think that's just like the normal way of the market. Again, things go up and down. I wouldn't stress that much about it too much. Again, you have two examples of great companies who are still hiring right here. So I think it's definitely possible to be somewhere really great. That's not, just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean that doesn't exist out there.
And so what are some of the things that you see are kind of the positives and the challenges in this kind of environment that you guys are seeing, as far as obviously you're both still recruiting, so that's great, but what are some of those things that you see coming out of this market right now?
Yeah, it'll start with I guess the somewhat negative, the challenges side of that first. I think like a big thing that we are seeing is just due to, I think, students getting really stressed out, kind of going into maybe extreme methods to apply for a job. For example, we're seeing a lot of applications with ChatGPT. We're seeing a lot with like manipulation of transcripts, experiences. Like I actually do see sometimes people will like Photoshop a transcript to like mark out a negative grade, which honestly isn't even usually that big of a deal, but I definitely see it a good amount of the time. Or like they'll like, again, ChatGPT certain aspects of their application. And again, I know from a recruiter standpoint, I read resumes all day. I can always tell if you're copying and pasting from somewhere. And then that's just like, I mean, obviously it's not everyone. I don't want to say that it is everyone, but it kind of makes it a little bit more annoying for the rest of us who are doing things, more truthfully, I guess, and it, takes more time to kind of root through that out. So definitely it happens, but if you see it, discourage it. I don't think it helps your application at all to do any of that stuff, because we'll find it eventually. As far as
how much time do you spend on looking at each resume, would you say is kind of the average?
It honestly depends. The very first initial stage, not very super long. Again, we do get a lot of them, but the resume will be reviewed like a couple of times, first through me, then through the next round hiring manager, then through maybe like other parts through my manager as well. So like even if it's not super long in the moment, like it's enough time that like we get a good sense of like what you've done, where your strengths are, and again, if you are copying, cheating, etc., we will know. But yeah, as far as the opportunities, like the good stuff here, again, it doesn't matter like how much maybe let's say the next person next to you is cheating. Like we really do focus a lot on like your critical thinking skills and your genuine experiences, like in our interview process, we really try to like highlight like what have you learned and like how have you learned it, right? And being able to kind of like really think outside of the box. One thing we always say is that let's say you're giving a technical interview, like it's okay not to just know the answer right off the bat. That's super normal. Again, our hiring processes, we're trying to see who you are as a collaborator, as a team member, how are you thinking? How are you problem solving, right? So again, even if you don't know the answer, just kind of talk us through it, show your work, as everyone always says, and odds are you'll do just fine.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a I didn't actually realize how many resumes you saw with that kind of stuff. I'm not on the recruitment side of things. From the engineering side of things, I can tell you that it is right now an extremely competitive market. But I think this is actually a really great opportunity for you guys to broaden your expectations of what a development role might look like. There's a lot of stuff out there that isn't just straight like Google software development engineer. And I think with a market this tight, this is a really great time to open your mind to positions you might not have otherwise considered. You know, maybe a company that's somewhat small, or a role that you aren't sure about, but you know, why not go for it? I mean, when I was applying for jobs personally, I was applying for mostly just straight software development engineering jobs. And that's not what I do right now. Quality development is a little bit different. You know, the name, as the name implies, I'm checking the quality of the codes that the devs give me. I think of it as being a little bit evil. I try to break the code as much as I can. And then if I can't break it, I give it the thumbs up. And that's not a role that I would have expected myself to be in when I was applying for jobs. It's not one that I was thinking about or applying to directly, but I'm really happy in it. So I think that this is a great time for people to start thinking about the actual scope of what you can do with a CS degree, because there are a lot of really cool applications that you can do with your skill set.
And as far as advice, I know you gave some advice which is great. Do you have anything that we would kind of give our students advice on as they're facing into applying for jobs and internships this summer?
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess one of the biggest things I would definitely say is, and this might sound like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised. Apply for the roles you're actually interested in. Obviously, you should be trying new things, trying new roles here, like she was saying. But like, if you look at a job description and you're like, I really don't care about this company or this role, like honestly, don't apply. Because, which I know is funny to say, but like we see so many applications where it's like, again, super obvious that like there's been absolutely like zero effort. I've seen cover letters where the name of the company isn't even our name, right? So you're not even like writing over that. So like, and again, it's, you don't want to work for like, let's say Veeva, that's totally fine. But like you may as well put a few extra minutes in applying for another company, right? So my advice is, again, apply for the companies you actually care about. And if you actually care about that company, like put it an extra few minutes. For example, I know in our application here, we include like one quick question towards the bottom. We call it our why Veeva. It's optional, so you don't have to fill it out. But I feel like those candidates that take an extra 2 minutes just to give a quick summary of, hi, I want to work for Veeva because, or I like Veeva because, they tend to go a lot farther in our process, like big time, just because it shows us like, hey, this person is not just mass applying. They actually took a few minutes and they said, hey, I actually like Veeva and here's why. And like, I guarantee you those candidates do go like a lot like further overall. So that's kind of my advice.
And it translates to the interview.
Absolutely.
Right? Your enthusiasm when you meet people.
Absolutely.
On Zoom or in person, they're telling the story of this is your mission. I connect to that for X, Y, and Z reason.
100%.
Yeah, one thing that I would add, I might talk about this later, but when you're prepping for an interview for a company, look at the website. I've seen a lot of people who don't actually do this, but I find that looking at the website, getting a sense of not just what projects the company is working on, but what their values are, their mission statement, their goal statement, having that in mind when you go into the application and the interview is going to tell them that you cared enough, that this is something that's in, your values and the company values align, presumably if you have looked at them and you're still applying. So I would just, it's a small step looking at the website, but it actually does go a long way.
And when you're thinking about skills and competencies, like what do you think are really highlights for your organization? What are the things that you're looking for in those areas that students should really translate onto their resumes?
Sure. So I think the easiest, quick, obvious answer to that is tech skills are obviously important. If you want to be an engineer, try to outline your tech skills as clearly as possible, whether that's its own small section at the top or the bottom somewhere saying, hey, like, these are my programming languages, my tools, my frameworks that I know, right? I mean, that's always super easy for me as a recruiter, especially because I'm not hugely tech oriented myself and a lot of recruiters aren't. Like, if we can see something really quickly and easily that says, hey, this is what I know, that always works really well for us. And especially also if you're going to say like, I had an internship at like XYZ company, maybe bold or highlight like the skills that you actively use there. Like, let's say you use, I don't know, Java, JavaScript, HTML, like bold that or like put it on the side somewhere just so like me, if I'm looking over like a resume, I don't have to spend like 10 minutes like seeking out like, oh, do you actually know this or have you used this before? Like, it's really easy for that to stand out to me. And then as far as soft skills go, I know like we're actually getting a really big push in my company to go for like the EQ for soft skills, for communication skills. I know this is engineering. You might not think that that human component is important, but it really, really is. We're talking about customer roles. We're talking about like being able to collaborate in a team, talk to your manager, talk to other teams. It's a lot more important than you'd think. And I know that soft skills are a bit harder to show on a resume, but like, for example, you could show a wider variety of projects, maybe like throw in a group project or mention teamwork, you know, in an internship experience, right? Like maybe don't put exclusively independent projects on your resume if you possibly can, right? Like just explain to us that you actually know not only how to do the actual tech work itself, but that you can kind of show it, teach it, and work it within it in a team in a larger sense.
Yeah. So going off of that, also leadership skills that you have are good to highlight in terms of, were you ever a TA for a class? That's something to put on there. If you do extracurriculars, were you in a leadership position? You know, I was a club president for one of my extracurriculars, and it wasn't computer science related at all. It was for the creative writing club. But I was the president of the creative writing club, so it went on the resume because it's a leadership skill. And I will say that Intersystems in particular does really value a holistic approach. So while, yes, please put your software skills at the top of your resume, but also, you know, like she was saying, highlight your more interpersonal skills. You know, writing is good because it's about communication, which translates well to customer interaction.
So when you're thinking of the candidates that, you know, move ahead and the ones that don't, like what in your mind stands out as a, you know, the best candidate? What are some of those best practices that the students can bring as a candidate to your organizations?
Sure. So again, half my job is doing like those initial interviews. When you first come in, I read your resume. If I, you know, decide that I think it could be good to go forward, I will send you an interview invite for me or somebody else on my team. And then I'm going to be the one to speak with you, usually about like a 30 minute, like quick interview. And I know what stands out to me a lot in a good way is, again, like we mentioned before, like having that interest in the company, somebody who looked at the website, somebody who did a little bit of research, who actually knows what our company does and who knows why they might be a good fit is honestly huge. You'd be surprised how many people I see who come in and I'm like, oh, like, why do you want to work here? Or what do you know about the role? And they're like, oh, I didn't really check. Like, I don't really know, you know, and like just put in that few extra minutes of effort just to like really know about the company and about the role and just be genuinely excited. Like hopefully ideally you want to actually work here, and if you can kind of put that excitement and that passion, you know, towards CS, towards engineering, towards the role and towards the company, I think it really does go a long way for the most part. And again, lastly here, again, on those communication skills, like somebody who, I'm not expecting you to be a perfect interviewee. I know at this point you guys are all still new grads or even interns, right? So, but basically, I always like it in people who can actually like articulate their experiences pretty well, you know, who can actually say what they did and why it was important, right? You know, at the same time, don't go into the two extremes. Don't give me like one word answers, but also don't give me like a 5 to 10 minute tangent that, you know, goes way off track from the original question, right? Like try to be, you know, brief and concise, but at the same time, kind of explain in good detail what you did, how it was relevant, and, you know, why I should know about it really.
Yeah. So piggybacking off of that, I think my tip is also dress for success. You would rather go into a company with a casual dress code in a business suit than go into a company with a business dress code in jeans and a t-shirt. So dress for success, just generally the basics, be punctual, know what you're talking about, that kind of stuff. It does help. I was once, I have seen an interview where the candidate showed up 10 minutes late in a t-shirt and jeans, did not get the position. So, you know, stuff happens.
The small things, right, make the difference sometimes when you're trying to decide between candidate A and candidate B, right? So like, no thank you note, for example, that makes it really easy, right, to determine who moves forward and who doesn't. So little things, right? Kind of make the story of the candidate and how they're interested in your
Did you all hear that? Send a thank you note.
Yeah. And written or email, right? It could be, yeah, either way, right? Yeah, perfect. And then in terms of, I guess, you know, a student doesn't have an internship this summer, for example, you know, how would you recommend that they try to get some experience, like concrete experience, so that they can be a good candidate for you all kind of later on?
Yeah, definitely. So internships, again, always good, but they're not the be all end all. If you either don't want to or aren't given that chance, that's totally fine. Again, I think some things I'd probably recommend is maybe if you want to take like a summer class or a program, right? Like take a chance to kind of improve your skills and like learn something, you know, new in the setting, in a class setting, if you can, right? Maybe try to find some kind of hackathon happening near you if you want to, again, be in that engineering space. I think is always a fun way to kind of have a project that you can then talk about in an interview. Be like, hey, like I had this super intense, you know, 48-hour hackathon with like a new team that I never had before. Like that's always a cool experience to talk about. You could do a personal project. I've had some really amazing interviews where they chose not to talk about an internship if they had one, but a personal project. And they got like so in depth into it and how much they enjoyed doing it, and how much it relates to like what we're doing at my company. And I was like, wow, like I love that you put this much effort and care and passion in something that you chose to do, again, on your own free time, obviously unpaid, right? So like that definitely goes a long way. And again, yeah, just anything that really like helps to teach you new skills and just shows that you're actually excited about the field and excited to take on, you know, like a bit of an extra challenge here and again.
Yeah. So one thing that I would add on to that is ask your professors if they have research positions open. And this I definitely want to stress if you are a sophomore, because at least this was what happened to me. You know, freshman summer, you can get away with maybe being a camp counselor for computer science kids, which is what I did. Junior years, where a lot of the big internships, they're looking for like juniors, rising seniors, and it's really hard for sophomores to kind of get in there. There are a couple of exceptions, but it's really skewed towards juniors. So at least for me, I felt in my sophomore year, I was in this limbo where I didn't want to do camp counseling again. I needed to get more into my field, but a lot of the big internships weren't looking for sophomores. So research positions, ask your professors if they have research positions open. I did a research assistantship my sophomore summer and I liked it so much. I did it for my junior year as well, like in addition to all of my classes. It's a really great way to kind of showcase like your thinking skills. If you write something up, that's good communication skills. If you publish a paper, so that's definitely something that I would suggest.
Yeah,
Can I interject? If you don't do it at Tufts and you do it quickly, if you find a research thing in the next few weeks, you can also apply for our internship grant. Anything nonprofit, any research that you do at another school, Tufts doesn't count because we have ways of doing that at Tufts. But just so you know, that's another way to get research experience and potentially get paid for it. Our grants, 1 out of every 2 to 3 people get them every year, and they pay $4,500 for the summer, but you have to apply before spring break, which means you have to do it soon. Sorry.
and I was gonna add too, if you're not familiar with Jumbos for Jumbos, the project-based opportunity. Many of our alums will submit projects to the Career Center and they will put them up in the herd. And students from across all the class years can apply. Some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid, some of them are a month long, some of them might be the whole summer. But that's another great way. And they do have a lot of ones that look for technical skills, website design, you know, human factor pieces to that. So yeah, I think just keep your eye out. We will be sending those projects out from the Career Center probably like right after or right for reading period is typically when we start sending out the projects that you can apply for with the alum. So just kind of have that on your radar. And we also have a virtual opportunity with Forage. They offer kind of self-guided projects that you can do virtually. And a lot of companies like to see that you've gone through and submitted a project. They do look at those students for internships and opportunities, and that's also available for free to all Tufts students from our Career Center website. So it's called Forage.
Forage through our website, and they're 5 to 10 hour projects or longer if you've never seen this stuff before, but they allow you to submit that project. You become an applicant for future with the company that put up the project, but it also can go on your resume, not as experience, but rather as an activity. But that's another way of showing that you did something career related over your summer.
So in terms of technical interviews versus behavioral interviews, what's kind of your advice for preparing for the behavioral interview and for the technical interview? What's kind of your take on those two?
Yeah, definitely. So I do a lot of behavioral interviews, so definitely know what I'm talking about here. But I will say again, which we mentioned before, easiest thing to do is just kind of prep in advance. Again, you just spend hours on this. Just look at our website, look at what we're doing, what we're working on, right? Look at the role, the job posting. Again, have a good reason as to why you want to work, for that company that you're applying to, right? But that being said, do not over prepare. One big thing that I do see a lot of candidates do, I think they think it's a good thing, but they will like plan out every word that they're going to say for every question they think I'm going to ask. So they'll have like, I can tell they have like a Word doc out, and they will like lean forward and like start like reading like word for word for word everything they're saying. And like, I understand why, but at the same time, like it kind of takes away from like the genuine nature of what is supposed to be an actual like behavioral conversation, right? Like I'm not really getting a good sense of your ability to communicate properly, to kind of engage with me if you prepared a document and it's like just something you're reading off of, especially because sometimes I will ask a question and I can tell they didn't quite prepare for that exact question, but had an adjacent question. So they'll like read the answer to a question that I kind of didn't ask. And it's like slightly like off what my actual point was. And like that will happen. I can tell that they're just trying to mix and match as best as they can. So again, even if you're not sure, even if you weren't expecting what I was asking, just kind of like do your best to go for it naturally anyways. I promise you'll do a lot better than if you're gonna like over prepare like that. And as far as technical goes, from what I hear from other engineers who handle the technical parts, again, for Veeva, at least we have online rounds and we have like, live coding technical rounds. Practice always helps. If you're not sure of the tech stack for the posting, feel free to ask the recruiter in the initial round, right? I usually have a decent idea of kind of what we're going to be doing. Practice always helps. But again, like I said, if you don't know the answer to a question right away, especially for a live technical, again, that's okay. We're not always looking for 100% perfect. I know everything that I am doing. That's probably not going to be the case. And again, that's fine. We just want to see what your problem solving skills are like, critical thinking skills. Like if we ask you a question, whether it's theoretical or, quite literal coding here, like just what is your thought process and why are you choosing the approach that you did, right? Why do you prefer this over that, right? Kind of just like, again, talk us through your mindset and kind of, I don't know, just like do your best, honestly, is all I can really say in that sense.
Yeah, so to her point about over preparing versus under preparing, this is the creative writer in me, but there's kind of a thing, plotting versus pantsing. Plotting, I can kind of see as you have a Word document with every single word that you want to say in this interview. And pantsing is you haven't really done anything at all. You're just, making it up as you go along. And I, as a creative writer, fall in the middle. And that's kind of what I would advise for all of you, is to have an idea of what you want to say, especially to stock questions. Like, tell us about a time that you like struggled, or tell us about a group project, or, certain questions that they might ask you, kind of know like what anecdote you're going to bring up. Like I had like a group project anecdote that I would use for any group project question they threw at me. But I didn't write every word of that out to kind of keep the dialogue more natural. So that would be my advice, is to kind of know what you're going to talk about, but not exactly what you're going to say. So to kind of walk that balance. And then, yeah, for technical interviews, at least with Intersystems, we, as far as I remember from when I was interviewing, we don't necessarily do live coding rounds, but a lot of other companies do. And there are resources that you can use to kind of prep for that, like LeetCode or HackerRank and stuff like that. I definitely did a lot of those when I was doing my interview rounds.
Do you think those are helpful tools to use?
I think the reality is that a lot of companies use them, especially post-pandemic. Back in the old days when the dinosaurs roamed the earth in 2019, I did whiteboard coding interviews. When I would go into the office and they would have a whiteboard and they would say, okay, here's your coding question, write it out here. And to be honest, I preferred that to the live coding rounds in front of the computer because I felt like with the whiteboard interview, they're not focused as much as syntax error, you missed a semicolon, because it's more extemporaneous and it's more about how are you thinking about solving this problem. And you also have when you're face to face, there's a better rapport with the interviewer. So personally, I'm more of a fan of that because I feel like it's better at identifying how you think, but the reality, especially post-COVID, when a lot of things you realize you can do better remotely, LeetCode and HackerRank are here to stay. So definitely preparing on those is valuable for interviews.
Yeah, and I know we kind of jumped into the behavioral interview and the technical interview, and students submit their resumes and say, okay, I don't have a clue as to how long is this going to take? What's this process look like? Is this going to be a 3-month process with interviews on site and virtually? Maybe you can kind of give a general overview of what your recruitment process looks like in each of your organizations.
Yeah, definitely. I can tell you exactly what we do start to finish. And it looks pretty similar for both interns and for full-time. So first thing that happens, you guys put in your resume and your application. It goes to a member of the recruiting team. So somebody, again, like me and my team, we look through that stuff first. If we choose to move forward based on your application, we'll send you an invite for an in-person interview. It's over Zoom. It's a live, whatever, Zoom interview, usually about anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes is the average. And then based on that, if we choose to move forward, what my team will do is we'll send you the online tech assessment. So that's usually anywhere from 60 to 80 minutes long. It's kind of similar to LeetCode style. So that's kind of where that LeetCode is probably going to help you a little bit to kind of know how to answer those style of questions. If you pass through that, we then what you do is team matching at that stage. So we kind of take all of your information. We look at your online assessment. We look at the notes that I've made from our first interview. We look at your resume. We match you to the team we think is probably the best fit for you based on everything. And then we call kind of a team day. So it is all over Zoom, but it's kind of made to mimic kind of a live day where you get that chance to meet a few people from that future team that we just matched you with. And that's usually a combination of both behavioral and technical style questions. Again, giving you a chance for you to get to know the team, for us to get to know you, to see what your skills are like, and how does it align with our team. If it's an intern, it kind of stops right there. If you're looking for full time, we'll then also ask for references and check references. And then after that, that's pretty much it.
So what's kind of the duration, would you say, from beginning to end on average? We know there's never the same, having been a recruiter myself, there's not the same typical every single time, but what's kind of the average?
Yeah, it definitely varies a lot, I guess, just based on how many applicants are coming through or not. But I like to say that usually once you've been granted an interview, so once I reviewed your resume, from that stage until, let's say, full offer stage, maybe 3 to 4 weeks.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say 3 to 4 weeks. Wow. Yeah, so for Intersystems, the timeline can vary depending on the role you're applying for and the level of experience that's required for the role. So I can talk about the specific process for the role I applied for, but in general, if you're confused, you can always email the recruiter and ask for an estimate. Chris has the iPad where you can all put your emails in, and then we'll have you in our talent pool so you can reach out then. So my personal experience, I applied to the rotational program for new graduates. So from what I recall for the rotation program for the new grads, I submit the resume. There were several different online assessments. There were online behavioral assessments, which was new for me at the time, and online technical assessments. You move through, I would pass one assessment, they would send me the next one. Eventually I reached the interview stage. I remember that very clearly. That was 8 hours of interviews over 2 days, so 4 hours each day. during election week 2020. So that's very much burned in my brain, that kind of period of time. And then beyond that, I asked for references. They also did talk to me because I interviewed with all of the different teams that I would be rotating through. So after the interviews, I also did talk to recruitment to kind of see like, okay, which teams did I like, which teams like me, kind of sussing out where a potential match would be. And I remember it took 2 months from when I submitted my resume in late October to when I signed my offer letter in late December.
And my last question before we open it up to questions from folks in the audience is, so if you were a student again and had to go through this process, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently, change slightly, just to kind of think about it in reflection as a student again?
Sure. So a quick disclaimer, I was not an engineer. I was not in tech. So I did something slightly different, which is totally fine. But if I had to like look back and think about what I would do if I wanted to be, again, let's say some kind of software engineer in the industry, I would say is try to do any kind of work at this point that you're actually really passionate about. Again, I know that sounds like a no-brainer, but again, it's surprising to come by sometimes. Like I know there's a lot that you can't control, like with your academics, with your classes. I know a lot of you take the same core classes, and as you should, you need it for your major. But at the same time, like try to find some way to kind of show us who you are through your extracurriculars, your internships, your research, personal projects, right? Like kind of, if you're going to work on something, you may as well work with something that you actually care about. It's going to show us like who you are, where your strengths are individually as a person, I think is really huge. Again, that's what we see and look for a lot. And secondly, as a smaller just like advice, not even resume or career wise, but like honestly, like attend career fairs or info sessions if your school has them. I know Tufts does do them, right? I really wish that my school doesn't do a lot with career fairs. I really hope, wish that we would have had one. But I know I travel to career fairs during seasons, and I think it's such a great way to get to know the company, before even applying in a very like low key setting here. Like ask your questions, like get a better understanding of like the role, the culture of the company, whether you would actually want to work here, right? I feel like taking a few minutes to go to an info session or a career fair and actually getting to know what the people who work there are actually like, I think is kind of really huge. And it also honestly makes the interview process a lot easier, because then that's less research you have to do on your end, because you already talked to somebody who told you directly, what we want to hear and, what the company does. And I feel like people who actually make that effort to see us at a career fair, come to one of our info sessions, tend to do a lot better, again, also in the interview round, because they've actually talked to us and kind of already know like half of what we expect.
Robin and I agree on the career fair for sure.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I have been to many career fairs, both as a student and also representing Intersystems in the past couple of years. Yeah, so I guess my advice would be to, again, this is a great time to do this, but I would definitely have been more open to the roles that I was applying to. And, to her point, I wouldn't have like been open to a role that I wasn't passionate about, but more open in terms of the development roles I was applying to, because I am right now really passionate about QD, which is great. And I wouldn't have thought of QD initially. So I think kind of taking a minute to kind of see what more is out there. And then I guess my other piece of advice would be like, sometimes you get a bad grade in a class and it's fine. Like I got a C in one of my core classes, and I tried really hard in that class and it was really frustrating and it didn't matter, but it also didn't matter because I still got a job. I'm not saying don't try your hardest, absolutely do, but sometimes, you can get a C and it's not like the end of your career. So, that's something I definitely needed to hear when I was a student. So I will tell all of you now.
Love to open it up to questions. Yeah.
I have two. One, can you please describe your typical day? And two, what's the most frequently asked question you get about your jobs? And what is your answer to that?
Sure. So I'm a recruiter. So do you want to hear about a typical day-to-day for an engineer or in my job specifically?
Your job, because I want to get.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So definitely depends a little bit depending on where we are in the season. A lot of my job consists of, if I'm not traveling, I do a lot of resume review. I know right now we just reopened our postings for Boston, so I'm getting like over 100 a day. which not that I can necessarily get through that myself, but again, definitely a lot of resumes. I also do a lot of interviews. Again, because obviously we talk to a lot of people who are applying. So I do interviews every single day. And then I do a lot of logistical stuff, like making sure people are progressing through the cycle, making sure that everyone's getting their transcripts in order, resumes in order, etc. Planning small projects and other day-to-day events. And then if it's like, let's say in the fall, especially, that's kind of like our busy season, I might travel to other places in Boston, like Northeastern or BU, or like other schools in the area. Georgia Tech, for example, is one of our big ones. And kind of go to career fairs. We host info sessions. We also do office tours for some schools. So that's kind of my overall day-to-day for the most part. And so what was your second question?
What's the most frequently asked question you receive about your job?
Yeah, so I think one of the most common questions I get is probably relating to like the work culture, which I think is definitely a good question to ask. And I'm really actually really happy that I'm getting that now more and more, because I feel like back in the day, even before my time, I would hear all people would care about would be just like the very nitty gritty of the job. And I'm really glad that people are actually caring not just about logistics, but also, about the work culture and what it means like to actually work at this company. I think that's awesome. I know we have a lot of that also online on our website trying to address that question. But I think that's probably what I hear the most, which honestly I'm not mad about. Or I hear a lot about like what my favorite part is about working at Veeva, as a question I get asked all the time, and always happy to answer that. And yeah.
Yeah, hello. I think I know you. So I guess in terms of my day-to-day, I would say it varies pretty greatly depending on where we are in our release cycle. So for example, this past week, we're getting really close to releasing one of the versions of the database. And so I've been grinding a little bit, especially because I had a last minute change come my way that needed to be tested like right then, right now. So my past week has been, I've been doing a lot of testing, and then I've been in very close communication with the developer to make sure that the behavior I was seeing was expected. But I know that once this release passes, things are going to calm down again. And I guess when things are calm, for me, it's a lot of, I'm sitting and I'm coding. There's a lot of, for me at least, in my specific team, I do a lot of independent work. I'm given a feature and then I write up a test plan and I kind of follow that test plan, and I'm like designing and implementing this test code. But overall, we are a pretty collaborative company, and there are days where I need help from the developers. Is this behavior normal or not normal? Or kind of what areas of this need to be tested, things like that. So in that case, I'm like on calls a little bit. The developers on my company are all very nice. They are all always willing to answer my questions, even if I'm afraid the question is stupid. They have never made me feel like stupid for answering any question, which is very nice of them. So I guess it kind of covers the spectrum depending on like the week a little bit, the feature, the priority, of like really calm, like mellow solo work versus like really intense crunch work versus like, a lot of collaborative work. So I know that's a little bit of a non-answer, but it kind of just really does depend. And, I love it. I love the variety, honestly. It's kind of nice. And then your other question, I've also forgotten. My memory's a goldfish memory. The question I get asked the most about the job, right? Yes. Okay. Still working. Honestly, Intersystems has been around for over 40 years. People are a little bit surprised when I tell them that, and they'll ask like, what's that like? I guess I would say it shows, for me, the way I see it is we're like a little corporate in that we do have a business casual dress code, and you're not going to find any ping pong tables in the rec room, but honestly, it's fine. I don't care. If I have to wear slacks to work, I have to wear slacks to work.
Other questions? Yes.
Since Caroline mentioned that, for for the hiring process intersystem, there's gonna be an 8 hours across 2 days. How is like the hiring process for Veeva systems works?
Yeah, so honestly, I'm gonna be honest, it's not that intense. I don't think I would want to do that myself either. I totally understand why that happens. I don't think we do that. To give you a quick timeline for all of our interviews, initial screen, 30 minutes, online technical, maybe an hour. And then we do our team day. That team day is usually about 3.5 hours over the course of one day, to give you that chance to meet with usually 3 to 4 people from that team. Again, approximately 45 minutes to an hour each, hence 3.5 hours. If you pass through that, that's it.
Other questions?
Saw Chris
Just
was
to
on.
quickly
Yeah.
add, so when Caroline started at Intersystems, our SCP and CDB program, the teams were much bigger. We now have downsized, so there's only 3 teams that you would need to meet with, each 45 minutes each. Before that, you would have a 20-minute call with recruiter Richard or Lauren, our campus recruiters. And then there's 3 assessments. One's 15 minutes, and then one is 45, and one is 30 minutes. So kind of like an hour and a half with the assessments, 20-minute recruiter call, and then you would have those 3 with the rotations that you would be talking to just to figure out if you like the team, whether you don't. And then for interns, much less. You would have just the tests, the assessments, and then 1 call with 1 team. And that's it.
I'm glad it was 18.
Pared down nicely.
Yeah,
That's
I walked
great.
up-
Uphill.
Yeah, both ways,
Yeah.
uphill, barefoot and stuff.
Other questions? This is your chance to ask. Yes.
We touched upon career fairs a bit earlier, so I just wanted to ask what you think would be the best way to approach a recruiter or representative at a career fair, because I've heard a lot about elevator pitches, but I've also heard the other side, like, hey, 30-second elevator pitch is just going to bore the other side out, and that they would prefer a more natural conversation. But sometimes that conversation doesn't include everything that you want to talk about.
Yeah, that's a good question. So honestly, I think I know some schools like publish like lists of all companies that are coming ahead of time. I'm not sure if Tufts does that.
Yeah.
Perfect. And that
We're scouring those lists.
oh, perfect. Okay. In that case, then let's say if there's a couple companies there that you actually are really interested in, I think it always helps to do like, again, 2 minutes of quick like online Googling beforehand. Like, let's say you actually want to talk to Veeva. Like, I'm always super impressed. Somebody comes up to us and like, oh, actually, I already know a little bit about you guys. You guys do X, Y, Z, right? And I'm like, wow, like, thank you for actually coming ahead of time to a career fair and already knowing what we do. It always makes the conversation like a lot more easier because I don't have to spend that time telling you everything. That being said, if you've never heard of us before and you come up to us, that's also totally fine. If you don't know anything about Veeva, I'm not like expecting you to, so that's totally okay at that stage. Honestly, I don't necessarily mind elevator pitches either way. I know why they're going on, obviously, but I kind of honestly prefer a bit more of that natural conversation. Again, that's totally up to me. And if you have a short pitch, that's fine. I've just had people come up to me and they just like talk for like 1 to 2 just straight minutes, just like nonstop tech talk. And at that point, like I do glaze over a little bit just because it's a lot to take in, especially because again, a lot of recruiters are not technical people. So I would recommend, again, asking questions, asking again, oh, if you don't know about Veeva, like, what does Veeva do? Like, what do you like about Veeva? Like, what can I learn at Veeva? Like, ask more about internships full-time, ask about the tech stack, right? Anything else you might be interested in knowing. I honestly prefer that. I feel like it's a bit more engaging than just telling me just about you. And obviously I will ask you about you as well. But at the end of the day, we also have your resume, and this is not an interview. Like, I'm not going to be able to unfortunately get you a job based on this one conversation. So as long as you kind of leave like a nice, great impression, you have like your resume in hand, we'll reach back out to you if we like see a potential fit, if that makes sense.
And always bring your resume. If
Yes.
it's in
Yeah.
person, bring your resume copies
Yeah.
in hand to give to the recruiter, even though they still will probably apply on your website, but they still should bring an actual paper copy. And I think for first years and sophomores, the career fair can be a very low-key, less stressful experience. So you can actually wander and talk to folks and not feel like I need to get X at this fair or find about the internship or job. So I really encourage those of you who are first years and sophomores just to go and explore, because it's really fun. I think it's really fun, and it's about talking to people that you don't no. I think it's less of this recruiter and I, having this formal conversation or interaction. It's really, how do I just go there and just see if this is something I really want to explore further? This organization interests me. Do I want to move to the next step, maybe next summer? So yeah, I think there's just a lot less stress and pressure if you go a little earlier. So just something to think about if you're a first year or sophomore.
I would like to second that. That was my experience my first year. And I would also say a little bit to her point and then to my point about plotting versus pantsing, kind of know what your elevator pitch is so that you can launch into it if you need, but start off with like natural dialogue, just so know your talking points, but don't recite them a little bit like a robot. That would be my advice to kind of find that balance.
And I think you had a question, yes.
Oh, yeah. So about the why Viva or general like cover letter questions, a lot of the time less so about cover letter, but more so about like why Viva, why this company, why this product. I have a difficult time like kind of, do I talk about myself? Do I talk about the company? Do I talk about the product or the specific like job? Because usually like, let's say like I'm gonna work at Disney, like I'm not gonna be making animations, but that's what I like about Disney, let's say. Like it's a very interesting thing. Like, and then there's like companies that like, oh, we're building like cloud systems for this and that. And I'm like, I don't care really, but also like maybe like a quality assurance job. It's like really interesting to like test code. Like what would you, but I might not know what the job is before I apply. So like, what's like a good answer you've gotten to that? That's like not repetitive, because it's also, I don't want to like write your pitch from your website and like paraphrase it to you.
Yeah. First of all, I do have a friend who works at Disney as an animator, so it's really funny you brought up that example. I love bragging about her to people. I guess the way I've heard it is a kind of like there's why you, there's why me, and then there's why us. So it's kind of, I think what works best is that why us, right? Like, why does what you're doing fit with what I want to do? So it's kind of that merging and that blend that that's what I would do when I was answering that kind of question in those kind of cover letters. And I am employed, so something worked.
Yeah, definitely. I love that approach, like that why specifically. And honestly, I've seen some really great answers coming from like all over the board. I'm not saying there's like one specific way you have to answer that question. Like again, we work in, software in the life sciences, right? So it could be your connection is, to life sciences is always great. You could say, hey, like maybe I have worked in it, maybe I haven't, but I think it's really cool. Or I've, looked at your company values and I love what your company values are because I also value XYZ, right? Because of, again, reasons XYZ. Or you could say, hey, like the role seems really cool. Like you guys have a development program. I love how it's structured. I think it's super interesting. Or you could even say like, I've had my own struggles with certain medical conditions, so I know what it's like to work, to like, be in a hospital, be in a clinical trial, and I love the idea of working for tech that also kind of connects to that, right? So it kind of could be, I've seen great like why Vivas in like so many different categories. It's just kind of like literally whatever about Veeva or the role sticks out to you in particular. And it can be anything in the company in general. Just show me that you've done some kind of looking into it and there's something that relates to you, like no matter what that something might be.
That's the why us piece. Whatever it is that you find that relates to you, that's the why us.
And I think there's no right or wrong. There's just, if you can't answer, if you're not prepared for the question, right? If you can't really come up with a sentence or two about the why, that's probably the worst way to go. But if it connects to you and your passion, that's going to translate, I think, to the recruiter or to the engineer that you're meeting with. So I think it's more about really knowing the job and knowing, what, how you connect to it. Because I think too, to your point, doing that research ahead of time, students might learn that they don't want to apply to that job, and then don't waste your time, right? Because what if they go all the way to the offer, they say yes, and then, they get another offer and then renege, right? That's kind of the worst case scenario. We don't want that happening, I know. And that's for us and for you, that means you're starting all over with your recruiting cycle. So we'd much rather have you do the deep dive at the beginning so that you know that that job is something that you really want to do versus waiting until I have 4 or 5 offers that I'm not really sure I really even wanted to apply to in the first place. So I think it's just start at the beginning versus waiting until you're at a certain point in the recruitment phase. Yeah, last question. Yeah. Is anyone else before? Oh, did you have a question?
How much of the hardcore knowledge you learn in college are actually applied in your jobs? And does it depend on positions?
Yes, this is a fun question because I work mostly in 2 languages. One is the in-house language at Intersystems, which obviously I didn't learn in college. They trained us there. And the other is SQL. And my college experience with SQL amounted to 2 weeks of my database course. And I use SQL every day for my job. I'm on the SQL team. They pay me to use SQL. So that's what happened for me. It will probably be different for all of you. There are other things that I learned in my courses generally, like how to think like a programmer, you know, like designing a big project, design docs, testing, all that stuff is very useful. But in terms of the actual tech stack, it is pretty funny to me still that 2 weeks in my database course amounts to my entire career. But I think with Intersystems, again, we have our fingers in a lot of pies. There are a lot of different departments and they use a lot of different, technical languages, program software, like different tech stacks. When I rotated through 3 different teams and I used a different tech stack for all of them. So I guess it just depends on where you end up. I'm sorry if that's a non-answer, but yeah.
Fantastic. And if these students wanted to connect with both of you kind of after today, what's the
Yes,
best way
totally.
to connect?
I am on LinkedIn. I'll put my name on the board and then I will turn my LinkedIn settings from super private to super public so that you all can reach me. I think I made that mistake after one career fair because I love online privacy and fully forgot that I had turned all those settings on. So I will remember to do that this time, but all right, my name up on the board. You can find me on LinkedIn and, if you have questions, you can absolutely reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer. I'm going to hang around mostly because I want some more pizza and I'm not in a rush to leave. So I'll be here for like half an hour or so before I hit the tea. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Same here. I'll put my name up if you need it. I'll be here for a few minutes afterwards if you have personal questions. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, let's thank our panelists.